welcome to tonight's public meeting on the City of Fife's Parks, Recreation, Aquatics, and Open Space Plan. Hopefully, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Zoom, having participated in meetings like this over the last 18 months as we've been in the pandemic. But just as a refresher, I'll go over a few things before we kick off the meeting. The first is just to make sure your audio is working. Hopefully you can hear me. If not, you may want to just turn up your volume. Also tonight, this is a webinar, so we can't see or hear you, but you should be able to see the speaker while we're giving the presentation. I am the first speaker. My name is Chris Hoffman, and I'm part of the team working on the Parks, Recreation, Open Space Plan. And I'll be helping running the presentation and facilitating tonight's meeting. A couple other things. If you do want to communicate with us, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can type in your question there, and then we'll all see it and we'll be able to respond to it. And we will be having a Q&A session at the end of the public meeting. So if you'd like, you can also hold your questions to the until the end. We are closed captioning this meeting, and if you don't want to see the scroll running across your screen, you can again go to the bottom of your screen and hit the CC button, and you should be able to turn off the closed captioning. Just as a reminder, we are recording tonight's public meeting, and we will be posting it to the city's website probably early next week if you're interested in seeing it again or sharing it with your neighbors who might not be able to make it tonight. All right, with all those logistics out of the way, we'll kick things off here. And I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce Steve Dew, who is the lead consultant working on the plan. And so Steve, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Chris, and good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Steve Dew, and I'm one of many members of the project team helping out the City of Fife on an update to its Parks, Recreation, Aquatics, and Open Space Plan. So thanks for taking some time out of your evening to join us tonight. We'll start with a real quick agenda, just so you get a feel for what we intend to cover tonight. We'll start with a short presentation. We'll have some interspersed live polling as part of that presentation. And the live polling does require a computer connection. So if you're calling in on a phone, you might not be able to participate in the polling piece of it, but you certainly will for the Q&A. Then we'll provide some time for some question and answer via the Q&A function, and then do some final remarks and close out the meeting. So just as a refresher, just want to start at the beginning of what is a PROS plan, or Parks, Recreation, Open Space Plan. Really, it's intended to be a 6-year guide and strategic plan for the city to guide how the city manages and enhances its parks, its open spaces, trails, recreation programs, and opportunities for the broader Fife community. It's a vision-oriented document and forward-looking, and it will have a series of goals and objectives to define what the city intends to do, or what it aims to do, and how to get there. It'll include a variety of information about specific project improvements, program enhancements, as well as implementation strategies on how to make the projects come to life. So again, the PROS plan is a strategic document, and again, will aim to guide city investments going forward. And it's really built on significant community engagement and community input. And I'll touch on that in a moment. But it also includes information about specific park assessments. We visited all of the parks and trails in the city, and we have some information that helps inform what goes in the plan from that. The plan will also include project and program priorities, and really is the foundation for the city's opportunity to pursue state-based grants or other grant opportunities. Just as a side note, in Washington State, The state requires that cities and jurisdictions have updated plans every 6 years. So this planning process is really helping the city maintain its grant eligibility. So hopefully it can pursue some grants, get some money from the state, and help finance some of these great projects that will be in the document. In terms of community involvement, I mentioned earlier that it's been a big driver in building the draft PROS plan, or Parks and Open Space Plan. Terrific community response so far. We've had about 600 responses from the community through community survey, through an online open house that we conducted in May. And you can see on the side of the screen the numbers there. But the city's also been very forward in pushing out social media content and doing a lot of communications about the project throughout the duration. And in terms of what we've heard from the public, nearly everybody, 97%, feel that parks and recreation are essential or important to the quality of life in Fife. About 3/4, 73%, visit parks regularly, at least a couple of times a month. So that's great visitation. From the community survey, one of the questions was, what brings you to Fife parks and recreation facilities? And you see in the chart that walking and running is at the top for reasons why people visit. 63% come out for walking and running opportunities using trails. And as again, a side note, that is in alignment with regional, state, and national statistics that walking, running, and trail usage tends to be the highest or near the highest usage for parks and open space. So again, this community-based information is in alignment with other data that's been out there for a long time. So again, continuity is a good thing when it comes to survey data. But the swimming and the aquatic center, those are also big drivers for getting people into recreation and program facility space. And about the same amount, a little more than half, 52, 53% say they come out for playgrounds. So those are really the top three strong contenders for getting people out into Fife parks. And in the online open house we did in May, we also retested some of this information just to see what sort of amenities people felt were of priority or strong interest. We heard a lot about the need for a splash pad. Again, strong interest in walking and biking trails, again, consistent with the survey data. The need for additional playgrounds, picnic areas, and additional or larger off-leash areas. So one thing to note is of those 5 items on the side there, 3 of them show up very, very clearly in the bar chart there. So again, consistency between data is great. So in terms of what else we've heard, we heard that there are some needed improvements to the Fife Park and Open Space system in terms of what people would like to see. So again, we posed the question, and splash pad or spray park came out as a very strong item for the community. And interestingly enough, the idea of a splash pad is one that has been around in Fife for many years. And I'll touch on that a little bit more in a minute. Walking, biking trails, again, connections, having links between parks is a strong desire, but also having some additional park amenities and conveniences, such as permanent restrooms or additional benches or just more trash receptacles. And then the notion of maintenance and safety and maintaining what you have, keeping things clean, keeping it safe for the user. Those are all popular items. On the recreation side, in terms of both programs and facilities, the idea of an outdoor pool or lazy river, one that's year-round, one that's covered, not just a seasonal sort of facility, was of interest and strongly noted. But there's also strong interest for additional or expanded youth sport programs and aquatic programs. We know that the aquatic center is booked to the brim, and it is a challenge for people sometimes to get in for lessons or to get in for programs. So there is a backup of demand there. So additional outdoor pool or lazy river could potentially offload some of the demand at the aquatic center as an idea. But then another idea or interest is renovating or potentially replacing the community center and using that for additional program space as it gets renovated. And as I mentioned earlier, our landscape architect visited parks and trails throughout Fife, and some of the takeaways are much more specific in terms of likely needs for improvements. And again, these sorts of things are potential projects that will show up in the first draft of the PROS plan. Things like trail signage at Frank Albert Way to just improve usability and let people know how to go from point A to point B. Additional pavement management to maintain trails and pathways as they age, and as trees grow, things will shift and buckle. So just maintaining that pavement over time is important. Something as simple or straightforward in terms of a project idea is the idea of updating the restroom at Wedge Park for a permanent facility. It's right in the heart of town and is one that's heavily used. And then additional playground upgrades and playground replacement over time, just to manage how those playgrounds handle the test of time and are well maintained going forward. But before I move forward into the next slide, I just want to let you know that we're going to do a quick practice poll to have you test out the technology to make sure that you get a good feel for how the Zoom polling system works. So on this next slide, you'll see a polling question. I'll read out the polling question, and we'll have several of these throughout the course of the evening. So it's good to just practice and get a feel for how this works. So the question is a very straightforward one. Which of these would be the hardest to live without? Chocolate, music, your favorite drink, your phone, TV, or not sure. So you'll see this pop up here. So use your device to select the one item that you can't live without. And we'll give it a minute or two to let people just get a chance to get their feet wet with the poll. So go ahead and enter your information. All right. So we've got some responses here, and it looks like music is an important thing that people can't live without, and that's excellent. That's excellent. We were just playing some great music right before the meeting started. A little Vivaldi. So, all right. So now that everybody's practiced the poll, just keep in mind how that works for a little later in the evening. And now I just want to dive into some more specifics, specific areas of focus for the pending PROS plan update. First off is with regard to a splash pad. I mentioned earlier that there'd been a long history of interest in Fife for a splash pad, and that's been consistent over many, many years. And it is an interest that's been noted in as a city project. And it's also one that the city is now starting to develop as a real project. So very recently, the city put out a request for designers to consider how to put in and design a splash pad over at Colburn Park, which is next to the Aquatic Center. So that idea is becoming a real project, and it'll likely become a project over the next year plus. So it's something to look forward to for sure. And it's just a way to say that these planning processes do result in actual projects in the ground. So in terms of a quick polling question about splash pads, it's a simple yes, no, don't know sort of question. Are you excited about the potential for a splash pad near the Aquatic Center? So again, pop-up will show up in a moment. If you've got some words to share about what excites you about a splash pad, after you do the poll, use the Q&A function to offer some other comments. So go ahead and take the poll. Yes, no, not sure. I'll give it a second. All right, this should be a pretty straightforward one. Not too many choices to pick from. And here we go. Yes, 80%. That's great. Good to see people excited. So that is just, again, another simple way to put it in the poll. And again, if you've got additional feedback, put it in the chat, or I'm sorry, not the chat, the Q&A function. And we've got one in there now, so that's great. And if you've got a second, put in some additional information about, what excites you about the splash pad. Megan over at the city can use it for a grant application if it's really well worded. So just send it in if you've got some ideas. All right, moving on. So playgrounds and playground replacements is another area of potential interest. And this is because several of the city's playgrounds, were built around the same time and are of the same style. So they really tend to focus on, certain age groups, 2 to 5 year olds and 5 to 10 year olds. And they offer a similar sort of play experience. You can see a couple images off to the side of some playgrounds in town. Next. And when it comes to playground maintenance and just managing the structure of the playground, they do get replaced over time, just like your roof on your house gets, replaced every 25, 30 years, whatever. Playgrounds typically also need to get replaced on a similar sort of time frame, typically between 15 and 20 years, depending on, age and condition and how hard they're being used. But of the 5 playgrounds that are in Fife right now, 4 of them will likely need to be replaced in about 10 years or within a 10-year window. And for the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space plan that we're doing now, it's intended to be a 6 to 10-year plan. So we need to start thinking about, well, how soon should any of those playgrounds be replaced? How should they be sequenced? What should they look like going forward? And just start the ball rolling about thinking about playground replacements. One potential is to maybe even expand the playground footprint at Dhaka Park. It's in an area that can grow in size, and would that be of interest? Also, 5 Acre Park has some room to grow a playground. And then with Levy Pond Park down in the southeast corner of the city, that project is going through a design process right now, and we'll be doing a similar meeting like this in November where you can give feedback specific to that site, but that site also has room to accommodate a playground if it's of interest by the community. So again, playgrounds that are in the ground right now are somewhat similar in style. So going forward, a future decision is, should these structures, when they need to be replaced with something similar, or maybe replaced with a different kind of play experience that's more inclusive or more interactive. And I'm going to walk through a few photo boards for you. Next is, again, the traditional model. This is what the city has right now: post platform, slides, swings, very much familiar to everyone. Next. But there's also options for play experiences that are more about body movement, more kinetic, where you use your body to rotate or swing or climb different sorts of structures. There's also nature-based play where the kid or the adult can manipulate the environment. They can move the rocks, the sticks, the sand, get wet, make mud, build structure, and have an experience with the environment also. And then there's inclusive play that's all abilities, just to make sure that people of all types and all abilities can access, use, and enjoy the playground experience, whether that's accommodating wheelchairs or accommodating people with different abilities. And there are also typically play areas that really draw in a lot of different people and users. Next. And last is all-inclusive, all ages, where the idea is that you're also incorporating fitness or other movement sort of amenities that relate to older adults, whether it's parents or grandparents or others who can also utilize that same space for their exercise and for their own mental well-being. So in terms of playground replacements, other considerations just to keep in mind is that, you know, the traditional play structure is one where, you know, kids typically age out at around age 10. So a question is, what should the city think about for that age group that's between 10 and 16 or 10 and 17 for play activity to keep them moving, to keep their bodies developing? Also, when it comes to play area design, it's important to have amenities that support the parents, the grandparents, and others, such as seating or picnic areas adjacent, or even having shade structures just to keep the hot summer sun off the play structures. So as the plan gets thought through a little more going forward, one of the questions will be about whether the playgrounds need to be placed and replaced and on what timeline, and whether they should be done one-on-one or kind of done as a package. So based on what we just saw, here's another polling question for you. I'll read it out. How should the city balance playground replacements for the needs of users? And this is about the different types of users. So should it focus only on younger children, 2 to 5, 5 to 10? Should it provide elements for older youth or teens like climbing, swinging? Should it provide elements for fitness and exercise, or elements for all age, all ability, inclusive play? What about nature play elements, or a blend of the above? If you mark other, again, feel free to use the Q&A function to offer some ideas. So we'll give folks a minute to give some feedback on that.
And Steve, while we're waiting, I just noted that there was a comment saying that the options are all important and could the city do one of each? So I think that there's a blend of the above answer that would fit into that question.
That's great. All right, so a blend of the above. All right. Everybody thinks some blending is good. So variety is the spice of life, right? So we will keep that in mind as we think forward about play area replacements for Fife and give some ideas for city staff and for the community to think about for the different parks that exist today. And again, for Levy Pond Park, that discussion could come back in next month's meeting as well. So another focus area is with regard to aquatics and recreation programming. So we've heard that access to lessons and programs sometimes can be a challenge, again, especially with aquatics. So we know that that need is there, and that there's some interest in the community for additional space to be wet, whether it's an outdoor pool or lazy river or splash pad. Those sorts of facilities can help with the programming side of aquatics and recreation. There's also strong interest in additional youth sport camps and after school or break camps, as well as adventure camps. So having additional facility space, thinking about an upgrade to the community center, thinking about the potential for an outdoor pool or aquatic facility helps bring all of these pieces together. And we've got another polling question for you, but before we kind of dive into the actual question, you know, we're trying to look at different ways to deliver on the services and on the interest the community has. And the COVID pandemic really has impacted what the city provides. And in some sense, it's been good to give the city a pause to really reevaluate, you know, what's offered and how things could be offered. And one question is with regard to after school or school break camps, because they haven't been offered in 2 years. How strong is that demand? So the question, due to the COVID pandemic, the city hasn't run after school or school break camps for youth for 2 years. So looking forward, what are your needs for after school and school break camps if you've got kids of that age? And again, bring them back because you'll definitely use them. Bring them back because you might use them. You've found other alternatives. you're not interested in city camps, or you don't have children in the age group, or not sure, no opinion. And we'll give that another minute. And this is where the Jeopardy music would be handy. I'm guessing we're probably close, and here we go. So not interested in camps. So you got one who might use them, one who's found another alternative. If you're comfortable sharing what that alternative is, feel free to put that information in Q&A. It's always good to know how people are being served by other programs in the area. So again, this is great feedback. So moving on, we've got a back-to-back poll here, so keep your fingers nimble. This one's specific to a community center. So the idea of renovating or replacing the community center. So what amenities would draw you in, or members of your household, to use the community center if it were renovated? And this is a select all that applies. So you could check everything, you could check one item, whatever is most important to you. So if the community center were renovated, potentially completely reconfigured, what sorts of things would draw you into the door and use that facility? Gymnasium or indoor basketball or volleyball, multi-purpose rooms or party rooms, cardio, fitness, dance, weights, exercise, a community meeting space, arts and crafts, cafe, you need more coffee so you can do your exercises, climbing wall, game room, not sure, no opinion. I'll give you a minute to put in your selections. And again, it's a select all, so feel free to pick whatever is most appropriate for you or your household. And again, it's good information just to see what would get people in the doors. All right, so we've got gymnasium and multi-purpose room, and then pretty balanced down the rest of the list for a few people here and there want a little bit of everything. So a little fitness, a little free weights, a little meeting space. So it looks like at least multi-purpose room, party room, and gymnasium space are two of the preliminary big ideas. Granted, it's not a complete poll of the whole community, but it's good baseline information for us going forward. So another area of interest or focus area is with regard to trails and paths. Again, from the community survey and from the online open house, we saw the community say pretty clearly that walking and running is what gets them out, that there's a demand and interest for additional trail connections. So the city is planning and implementing some trail improvements right now. So one is the planned widening of the Sheffield Trail that runs north-south just to the east of the schools. And then State Route 167. I think everyone in the community knows about that project and the recent opening of Wapato Way East. It's an exciting addition to the community, and that ultimately will bring a full multi-use trail along the entire eastern edge of the city. But also linkages between parks and other community destinations. But with trails, you also need to think about other conveniences, like with playground conveniences and picnic areas and shade. With trails, it's about signage and mapping, and also some rest areas. And potentially it could, if the trail network is more complete or connected, be an opportunity to have additional programming or tours, classes where you get people out to walk the city or just exercise more regularly. So again, on this one, we're really just trying to highlight some potential connections. These need to be further reviewed in some cases. But again, you can see on the eastern edge, the State Route 167 connection carries you right up to Hylebos. But then with Sound Transit, you've also got an east-west connection on the north side of I-5 and a secondary east-west connection from Hylebos to to the west. Yeah, that's west. All right. So again, these connections are both being planned and also being considered. So we have another polling question for you about trails. And again, from the community survey, respondents to the survey indicated that walking and running are the most popular uses of Fife parks and open space. What do you see as the most important options for improving walking and running trails in Fife parks? So again, to select all, so different options here: improve signage and trails to increase awareness, improve maintenance and upkeep of what you've got, build new connecting trails in existing parks to link walking and running routes, acquire and build new trail corridors through land purchases, easements, or rights of way, or all the above. I'll give you a minute to put in your selections on that.
And while we're waiting, we have another question. Is Hylabos Park part of Fife?
It is. It is. It is a city property with interior trail. All right. So in terms of the poll, we've got build new connecting trails in existing parks for walking and running routes. And again, the idea of building new trails is one that's consistent with the survey results. Again, people are out there to use trails, so having additional routes or connections is important, and it's clear from this response that this group of participants feels the same way. So again, great feedback. And then moving on, one final area of focus for the PROS plan for tonight's session is about other recreation opportunities. So throughout the process, we've heard public interest for picnic areas, for playground shade structures, for pickleball, additional or larger off-leash areas, and other amenities like bike skills or bike safety. Next. All right. So if you had to pick just one improvement in Fife's park system, which of the following would you choose? And this is a select one. So would you prefer that the city invest more in additional picnic shelters and tables for family gatherings, or shade structures for playgrounds, or a larger off-leash area, pickleball courts, additional community gardens, permanent restroom structures that in parks that don't already have them? You're not sure, or if you've got other ideas, again, use the Q&A function to provide some additional comments. So this one might be a little harder because you can only pick one, which means you've got to think about which is the most important to you or your household. So we'll give it a minute. All right, so off-leash areas. People love their dogs, and interesting little factoid from the world of park planning: off-leash areas and dog parks are very popular because those user groups are there every day, rain or shine, sometimes multiple times a day. So they really bring people to the parks. They liven up the areas, but they also add the bonus of providing some additional surveillance. So it's interesting to see that off-leash areas are important. Again, we've got pickleball and picnic shelters noted as well. But again, keep in mind, it's not a fully statistical sample tonight. So this is good feedback. All right. So at this point, I'm going to turn it to Chris to see if anyone has any additional questions, or we could just open it up for a Q&A session. Chris?
All right, thanks, Steve. And it's been great to see everyone's questions and comments already coming in. So if you have additional questions or comments you'd like to ask, I'm seeing a couple about ideas for nature parks, dinosaur theme. I think there was, I'm not sure if it got answered, but there was a question about safety in High Lobos Park and the city's plans for that. And maybe, I'm not sure if that.
Yeah, I would actually love to chat about that just a little bit because I see a few different questions coming in regarding High Lobos and the safety. And I would love to reach out to JoJo individually. I know they just provided their email address, so I would love to chat a little bit more about that. But just to give the listeners on the line some background information on what we are doing out at High Lobos. We are aware that there's a problem out there. When COVID hit, we had a few dozen homeless people living within the city limits, but when COVID hit, those numbers really started to explode. And we saw right away there was an issue out at High Lobos Park specifically. And so pretty quickly, we started a trash bag exchange program. The encampment started to add up, the trash started adding up. And so when our parks crew went out to High Lobos to do a trails check on a daily basis, they would talk with the residents out there and drop off 10 trash bags every day. And in exchange, they would pick up 10 full trash bags and load them into the back of their truck and head off with them. And that made a little bit of a difference, but there was just so many growing encampments out there that 10 bags a day just really wasn't enough. And so in March of this year, myself, along with our city's leadership team, went out to High Lobos. And it was really eye-opening for the leadership team to see everything firsthand and just how big the encampments were and what a problem it was. And so right away, we got to work on starting to get things cleaned up. We ended up having 6 30-yard dumpsters delivered out there, and we worked with the people that were living out there to get things cleaned up. The people living in the encampments filled up all 6 of those dumpsters by themselves. We had them all hauled away, and myself and our HR director head out on a bi-weekly basis to check on all the encampments and make sure that they aren't continuing to grow. Every time we notice things starting to pile up, we give them 1 week to clean things up, and then we head back out again to make sure that they have cleaned things up. In all of that work out there, we started building relationships with a lot of the people that are living out at High Lobos, and we started formulating a jobs program. And what that is our city council in March of this year asked that we put together a program that was big and bold to help tackle the homeless issue going on in Fife. And so we put together a program where 10 participants would be actively engaged in cleaning up our parks and trails and working along the city parks and city streets to help clean things up. And those participants would make an hourly wage. We would work on shelter services, providing hygiene services, and putting them to work and help them gain the job knowledge and skills that by the end of the program, they would be a viable candidate for a full-time job. So they would do things within the parks like cleaning up debris, doing basic landscaping, weeding, planting shrubs, but along with that, they would earn certifications like a forklift license, a flagger certification, a pesticide spray license, and things like that. So that at the end of the 12-month program, they would have a good chance of being hired as a full-time employee. So I know that's a lot of information. That's really just a brief overview of what that the program is. We do have another public meeting on this topic specifically this Thursday at 6 p.m. So if you'd like more information, you can find a link on our website to that public meeting. And JoJo, I would love to follow up with you individually as well.
All right. Any other questions or comments? This is your opportunity. You've got a audience here, so. All right, well, Steve, do you want to kind of wrap things up, and then we can, if people have additional thoughts, we can field those as you're kind of wrapping things up.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. So just moving forward, thanks everybody for all the feedback tonight and the responses to the poll questions. Again, it's all helpful information. If you want to learn more about the project, go to the city's website. There's a page specific to this project, the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. So from there, you can read a little bit more about the project, get additional information, or provide the city with additional comments through an email to Megan. And in terms of going forward, I want to put in a plug for a meeting for next month on November 10th. There will be another Zoom session similar to this one. It'll focus specifically on site designs for 2 city parks. One is Kappa Park on the north side, just north of I-5. It's a 4-acre piece of property right now. Big question is what to do with it. So working through some concepts on that one. And then Levy Pond Park in the southeast southeast corner of the city. It's a 43-acre piece of property with the pond and the walk around the pond and the little wetland overview there. So again, in November, you'll see and have an opportunity to participate in another Zoom session specific to those 2 design projects. But as far as the PROS plan, next slide. We are in the process of compiling an initial draft, a working draft. We'll be continuing to work with the Park and Recreation Board and City Council to get that reviewed and approved. The idea is to have a draft plan by the end of the year or earlier, and then go through City Council for review and adoption early in next year. So we're definitely closing in on a composite draft plan. And again, tonight's feedback has helped to give a little more guidance to project priorities and interests. I think that wraps it up for tonight, and I'll let Chris and or Megan make some closing comments, but I appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you everyone so much for attending. And like Steve said, shoot us some feedback, attend the next meetings. And if you go to bed tonight and think of something you should have mentioned, feel free to shoot me an email. My contact information is on the website, or you can send me an email at mgendrick@cityoffife.org. Thanks so much.